Hey everyone, so chapter 1102 just came out, and this just capped off what is, in my opinion, the best flashback in all of One Piece. 1100 chapters in, and Oda is still topping all of the phenomenal work that he has already done in the past. So one of the big things that I've talked about in the post-time skip is that there are aspects of pre-time skip writing that I still feel like we hadn't quite lived up to, at least in certain categories. I think post-time skip has been phenomenal for some things. I think that there are certain things that I felt were stronger pre-time skip, and for me personally, a lot of the emotions that I felt pre-time skip and a lot of the emotional writing that Oda was able to pull off pre-time skip, I felt like that was at a higher standard than what we were getting post-time skip. Not to say it wasn't still there and that we didn't still get plenty of really good backstories like Laws or Senor Pinks, but for me, if you ask me all of my favorite backstories in One Piece, they're all pretty much going to be pre-time skip backstories. I think I've got Fisher Tiger and Otohime's backstory probably in there from post-time skip as one of my favorite backstories. But while all this time I was kind of waiting on something in the post-time skip to basically live up to the type of backstory that Oda did pre-time skip in my opinion, but then along comes the Kuma backstory, which doesn't just live up to, let's say, like Robin's backstory or Chopper's backstory. It actually is a clear evolution in Oda's writing. This is something that supersedes everything that kind of came before. It's clearly a step forward. It's basically an improvement on everything that Oda has done in terms of writing backstories before, because Kuma's backstory is actually taking a huge leap forward from everything that came before it. Because for the first time, Oda is not just telling a small snippet of somebody's life, he is telling the full tragic life story of the character who has probably suffered the most and given the most in the entire history of One Piece. So the scope of what Oda was trying to tackle here was just so much more grand and so much more layered than anything we'd seen so far. And I think it's safe to say that with this chapter, he pulled off the entire thing with flying colors. I kept saying throughout Kuma's backstory that this is shaping up to be, in my opinion, the best backstory in One Piece, but it's all going to depend on if Oda can stick the landing. This chapter was sticking the landing, 100%. This was arguably the chapter of the year. If not this chapter, then the chapter where Ginny died. It's one of those two chapters. We can talk about that at another point. But before we get any further, make sure to get your One Piece inspired hoodies, sweatshirts, and t-shirts, all available in the Mord store. We've got some fantastic, stylish, subtle designs for you all. And make sure to get your one-of-a-kind puzzle of all the One Piece characters in minimalist art style, also available in the Mord store. There is nothing that can be said that is too much praise for this chapter, because everything that it covered, right, like up till now was setting up everything that we needed to understand as to the background of Kuma and where he was coming from. This chapter was the one that finally put all the pieces together, where we got to piece together the Kuma that we were learning about, and then the Kuma that we knew beforehand, the Kuma that we had seen at, at the Shichibukai meetings, the Thriller Bark stuff, the Sabaody incident, waiting for the ship. That Kuma, that tyrannical, scary figure, and this kind-hearted, benevolent, sacrificial Kuma, this finally merged those two together to have us retrace the steps of everything that we'd seen of this man before, but now with new understanding and insight into what he was really going through all this. Like, before, if you ask me, like the Sabaody incident, that's one of the most heart-wrenching, gut-wrenching moments in all of One Piece, because we're so emotionally invested in the Straw Hats. But now, it's on both ends. Like, if you go back and read the Sabaody incident, now the Straw Hats aren't even the victims in this situation, right? They're getting they're getting the luckiest get out of jail free card possible. The real suffering person right there, the real victim in that whole scenario, is Kuma, who's using his last conscious moments to basically get them the hell out of there, just so that that's his legacy, so that he can leave something behind to hopefully make a better world down the line. So an incident that was already so dark and so sad, now it's flipped to be even darker and even more tragic now that we know who the true victim was that entire time. That is just amazing writing. Now we can go back and whenever we're rewatching, rereading the Sabaody incident, it's just going to be hitting us from so many different ends. There's so much emotion and drama that we didn't really fully understand, the stuff that was overt, and now the stuff that we understand was underneath the surface coming from both angles. So it elevates that entire section of the story, puts it in a new light, also helps us understand by piecing the traces of Kuma, observing Luffy throughout the story up till now. It helps us understand why he began to believe that Luffy would be the one to save the world, the one that, could live up to the story of Nika and all of that. So those pieces fall into place, and I like that Kuma didn't have a ton of knowledge to go on. He just kind of felt right, like this guy is probably the one. It was a leap of faith, and he decided to bet everything on that. And even just Kuma's final thoughts as he's vanishing Luffy away, it makes that scene so powerful, because what he actually says is, goodbye, we'll never meet again. But what he's thinking is, I wish I could tell you the truth. This is for your own good. I'm saving you right now because I have so much faith and belief in you to one day be the person to change the world. It makes that scene so much more powerful. And then, of course, Kuma's final moments. The last 3 pages of this chapter basically conclude this masterpiece of a flashback as well as you could possibly imagine. Just perfect. Those are the pages that really made me tear up personally and really hit me the most emotionally. At first I didn't fully get what Oda was going for. I'm seeing Kuma running, seeing these characters, etc. And then slowly you're realizing, like, okay, as Vegapunk puts into words, every person that Kuma has met, interacted with, formed a relationship with, dynamic with, he has helped them. He has made their lives better. He has been a saving grace for so many people throughout the entirety of his life and the entire world of One Piece. He has been the ultimate unsung hero in the world of One Piece. This entire time, there was just this one dude, this one quiet, hidden, stoic figure going around, interacting with so many different figures, so many different islands, helping so many people, all the while going unrecognized, under the radar, fighting his own hidden battles, and it all comes to an end with him going out doing exactly that. And nobody would ever really know, even Bonnie didn't know what she was doing for him down to the very end. But that didn't matter because that's just the type of character that Kuma is, and that's what makes him, arguably, he's right in there in contention for the greatest character in One Piece, or the best written character in One Piece. It depends on how you view things. And one interesting thing that I saw people pointing out is that in those panels of him running, as we cut between each of the panels of him running as he ages, if you kind of put all of those together, then it actually looks like the Nika dance, him actually performing the Nika dance over the years. So in the process of Kuma dreaming of this hero Nika that would one day be able to save the world, that entire time Kuma himself was playing that role. Whether he recognized it or not, he was the embodiment of Nika without actually being Nika. And he's perfectly happy going out without being recognized as that savior that, changed the world. But the legacy that he left behind, which is saving the Straw Hats, helping so many people, that is ultimately going to lead to the world being saved, to the dawn being brought. So it goes to show that the spirit of Nika can reside in so many different people. Even if there's only one true one, which is Luffy, the spirit of Nika was just as strong in Kuma as it is in probably anybody in history. So absolute masterclass of a chapter, one of the best ever in One Piece, and this flashback, in my opinion, is the best ever in One Piece. And lastly, we have 2 submissions from my highest tier of patrons, the Voice of the People. Chinua Alabache says, I think the contrast of sadness and joy has been played up extremely nicely for the flashback, fitting nicely with the ideas of smiling in the face of adversity here. Kuma isn't the happiest with his situation, but he still does what he can to find joy in it. He looks at Bonnie from afar with a proud smile. Yeah, that's definitely one of the most powerful things about this flashback, just Kuma's attitude throughout it all, because all these other characters that meet him can recognize the pain that he goes through, but he is able to maintain throughout all that a positive, sort of hopeful outlook on the world, on life, on everything, on the possibilities of what little he can do, what little he can accomplish. And in the process, he does manage to do things that have butterfly effects that lead to great positive change in the world. So there's a lot of meaning there to the power of Kuma never really giving in at the end of the day. Never giving in to all of the suffering, all of the pain that he goes through. Because by never giving in, he is ultimately able to make a difference in a world that seems like it's hopeless. And Braxton Hart said, this chapter has me convinced that Bonnie is joining the crew. She's looking for Nika, her crew only calls her captain in name, and the last Pirate King's protege, Shanks, also had Celestial Dragon heritage. Yeah, this is something that I talked about in depth 2 videos ago, and it was something that I was talking about way before, towards the very beginning of Egghead Island, but it does seem very, very likely right now. I think the only 2 real options for Bonnie are the Revolutionary Army, or joining with the Straw Hat Pirates, but I feel like the Straw Hat Pirates seems like an even stronger bet than the Revolutionary Army, because the will that seems to have been passed down from Kuma to Bonnie is this dream of this figure Nika, who's able to one day save the world. I think that will matter more to Bonnie at the end of the day than joining up with the Revolutionaries. In fact, I think it's possible that Bonnie might even ultimately harbor some degree of resentment towards the Revolutionary Army for not doing more, simply because she's a child and she wouldn't fully understand. So that's an interesting possibility to think about. What is Bonnie's role going to be going forward, and what did this set up for her narrative? So that's all for this video, and I will talk to you all next week. And don't forget to get your One Piece inspired clothing and all One Piece characters puzzle in the Mord store, link in the description below.